Good morning. Today we're going to read some different verses. We're going to bring in Deuteronomy 17, 16 through 17 as a pre-reading. And after you've read that, you can read 2 Chronicles 9, 13 through 28. And we're going to skip just a little bit ahead to 2 Chronicles 10, 4. So that's Deuteronomy 17, 16 through 17, 2 Chronicles 9, 13 through 28, and 2 Chronicles 10, 4. So pause me, read, and I'll be here when you get back. Okay, so the Deuteronomy passage is Mosaic law, and it's God's law, and it says, don't get a lot of horses, don't get a lot of wives, and don't get much silver or gold. So that is a prelude into our lesson for today, which comes from 2 Chronicles 9, 13 through 28. The First Kings version, which is 1 Kings 10, 14 through 29, is almost word for word the 2 Chronicles. And it starts with this, the weight of the gold that Solomon received yearly was 666 talents, which that 666 is pretty ominous. That's his revenue, but he also got VAT, value-added tax, from the merchants and the traders. So at this point, Israel stretches from Egypt to the Euphrates to the Mediterranean Sea. It's covering a lot of ground. So all these trade routes, north, south, east, and west, had to go through Israel. And this was probably pretty wise of Solomon to make sure that his trade routes were taxed. So to move something through his country, you had to pay this value-added tax, a duty or tax. And he made a lot of money that way. Israel made a lot of money that way. So verses 15 through 20 talks about the gold that Solomon had. He had tons of gold, literally tons of gold, but he didn't hoard it. He didn't put it in a safe somewhere or a storehouse. He had items made of gold, the goblets, the shields. Most of these things were ceremonial, so the shields weren't used for actual fighting. They were used as when he would parade the soldiers out in front of, for himself and his dignitary visitors. He would parade the soldiers and they would use these shields. They weren't probably very practical, but they were showy. But it was a way to keep the gold out and not in a, I'm sure it was protected, but it wasn't all just sitting there being hoarded. And it did put people to work, we'll get to that later, making these shields. So verse 21 goes to, talks about the fleet of trading ships that was manned by Hiram and Solomon, remember, just like this. And they took this 3-year trip. Now, there's a lot of speculation on this 3-year trip. It could have been to Tarshish. In the original Hebrew, it mentions Tarshish. Nobody knows where Tarshish is. Some people think it's in Spain. A 3-year trip to Spain maybe used... the travel would not have taken 3 years, so maybe it was used to accumulate gold, to mine gold while they were there. Again, nobody really knows. Also, the mention of the ivory and the baboons might lead one to think it was Africa, which could have taken 3 years, depending on where in Africa they ended up and where they got these apes and baboons and the ivory, which obviously came from elephants. So needless to say, this is a giant merchant navy that's going out to acquire more stuff for Solomon. Verse 22 really hits upon the whole lesson for today. Solomon was greater in riches and wisdom. But was this true wisdom? He's obviously disobeying Mosaic law right here. He knows Mosaic law. So it's just flat defiance. And that's not true wisdom. So he probably had a lot of book smarts and probably again, the trade route thing, pretty smart. He's making his kingdom very rich. People are looking up to him from all over the world, the known world at that time. And he's looking really good, but that's not true wisdom, and that's the big lesson for today is the true wisdom. In verses 23 and 24, the kings come and pay tribute to him. These gifts are a form of tax. They probably are encouraged to visit once a year, to sit at his table, and we see that all the time in government today. You come in to have these state dinners, and everything's great, but in this case, you're encouraged to bring a gift, and it's not just a nice sword or something. It's a big tax. And then 25 talks about the horses that he gets from Egypt, which he's been forbidden to do by God, but he does it anyway. And we skip on to chapter 10, 2 Chronicles 10, verse 4. And this is the people of Israel talking to Solomon's son. And they say, your father, who was Solomon, put a heavy yoke on us. So this greatness, this splendor came at a cost to the people. And we'll read more about that later. But again, the lesson is, how wise was Solomon, and did he let his wisdom go to selfishness, to greed, to being power hungry? We'll read more later, but true wisdom is the wisdom of God.